China EVs and more, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. We have one rule. Although we appreciate vigorous debate, let's all be considerate and respectful to each other. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. Even if it sounds like investment advice, it isn't. We encourage those who enjoy this room to please connect with us on LinkedIn, get the word out to your friends, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li, and I am the Managing Director at Sino Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hey all, good evening from my side. I am the former chief editor of China Auto Review, which published newsletters and the only tabloid magazine in English focused exclusively on the Chinese auto market. Pre-pandemic, I spent pretty much 20 years on the ground in China covering the industry. Since the pandemic, I've been in the US as an independent analyst consultant, looking afar and still trying to keep tabs on the rapidly evolving market. And I mean that by the hour, not by the day.
Man. Constant screens, constant stream.
This is episode number 44. Hey, before we begin, big day for us. Our pod just surpassed another milestone, 2,500 downloads. Not much.
That's amazing. That's just a bananas number. We're trying to upgrade it next year, so you guys are in for some cool surprises. But I'm still. It still boggles my mind that I've never met you in person, had a beer with you, and it's just hilarious.
It is. And we started this, we published the first episode 7 months ago, and now we're at number 44.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we've done 44 episodes, but on our pod, we published, I think, 32 now. So I guess that's what all the Tesla 12.9 meme is all about, huh? Oh, no, it is. They just, the NHTSA just announced some kind of a faulty camera investigation.
Yeah.
So it was down after
hours.
So
it's not a myth.
So
there's something wrong. There's not a myth.
Anyways, so big day from Volkswagen of their big management shuffle. And Mercedes-Benz just became the first automaker to receive official authorization for level 3 automation on public roads. A big milestone in the robotaxi space, SAIC Motor became the first OEM in China to launch its own robotaxi service. Mm-hmm. And this other company, Deeproot, announced a $10,000 US dollar level 4 OEM solution.
Should I buy one and just bolt it onto my old Volkswagen Sagittar that I don't use at all, ever?
It's got like 5 LiDARs and 8 high-def cameras and all sorts
I'm sure I could just throw
things.
a MacBook Pro in the back of it and plug all the hardware into that and see what happens.
And then obviously CPCA yesterday announced, again, humongous numbers, right? We tweeted out that 10,000 club, 10K club, showing all the companies that have joined the exclusive club, right?
Not exclusive anymore.
not exclusive anymore, but elusive maybe. Ludicrous. What's the word I'm looking for?
It's an every man club now, man. It's anybody can join. Anybody can join.
And then some other news I think worth mentioning was this S-Vault, right? The Great Wall Motor spinoff battery announced 600 gigawatt hour of global battery capacity by 2025. A quarter of the 1.8 terawatt hour global demand. And the other quarter would be coming from CATL and then everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So first topic, maybe Volkswagen, right? I think it's not only was it, significant in the global point of view, but specifically with this new appointment on China.
Yes.
Right? Which was kind of, rumor for a few days already and was confirmed today with the supervisory board meeting announcement. What do you think?
So I actually believe that Dees is doing his best to really push the company forward as quickly as possible. And he has all these different constraints, whether it's the labor group or whether it's entrenched departments within the company, disparate brands that have different priorities. So he's got a very, very, very challenging job, obviously. But he was in the catbird seat. Well, his predecessor was, because they were leading the world in vehicle sales, or right next to Toyota. So they had opportunities to make these changes before they were forced to, due to this fast move into EVs by China. And they keep on throwing out these huge numbers, and I don't know how. And I'll include Stellantis in this, how they say by 2030, 20% of their revenues is going to be from software-driven services and subscriptions. I don't know how they feel that they can snap their fingers and become software experts, right?
Yeah, so just numbers, 89 billion euros in the next planning round, which is 2022 to 2026. And that's more than half of their capex. 159 billion euros. Okay. So that's the number they gave out. Continue.
And we have to remember that the numbers are meaningful. The investment amounts are meaningful when you're building factories, when you're prepping for production, job one, filling the pipeline and supply chain with parts. So these huge numbers make a difference. But 89 billion on software development, on digitization, I don't know what that means. Are they just going to hire a bunch of people? Because it's the skill. It's not 15 coders is going to get you to the skill level of an Apple, when they're having 3 or 4. It takes time, and I don't know. And I do speak to people here. I just don't know. There's a huge gap between what they're saying and how they're going to get there. And hopefully the media really, really digs into this a little bit, because they have Cariad, and we tweeted about this earlier, right? Or I DM'd you. I'm not sure what Artemis is. I don't know what Cariad is, but now Dees is the head of Cariad. And I'm being facetious, but there's a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of changes going on. And I tweeted earlier that all these quick decisions and all these changes in directions is an indication that management is not sure of what themselves. They're not sure of what they're doing. They're fearful of the future. So hopefully they stop thinking and talking about what they're going to do and just get to doing it.
Well, I take a different perspective. I think they know what they're doing, except the time frame is a little bit long out into the future. So
right,
they're looking at 2025, 2026 with the Artemis and the Trinity, which, by the way, is EAVs, right? So L4 capable, and that's going to compete with the G-Doves, right? With the Xiaomi's, with the G-Doves, who are trying to do the same thing. And having listened to Elon a couple of days ago on that Wall Street Journal interview, when he talked about CEO being a fictitious, it's a made up position.
Yes.
Then you look at the responsibilities of Dees, and he's the group CEO, but he's in charge of the software organization. Well, at least responsibility for software, but he's not a software guy. But he's all about software. If you look at his tweets and his comments. So I think that was the interesting move. But I guess,
and that's what I mean. To guys like me, he's saying the right things, right?
Right.
But it's rubbing people the wrong way on the advisory board and on the management team, right?
And I think the move for the the management board or the supervisory board is to kind of take away some of the responsibilities and maybe put a little bit more focus. And on the operational side, maybe give Ralf Brandstatter a little bit more responsibility,
right?
And put him in a group board of management position, for the the Volkswagen brand, and also China. And China in itself is such, we talked about it almost every episode, right? What they had to go through with the ID.
Yes. Can you give us a bit more history, up until this management change, a little bit of a lot of the old China hands for Volkswagen. So tell us a little bit more about that stuff.
So if we go back maybe all the way back to 2005 is when, there's been 4 CEOs before Ralf Brandstatter. So number 1 is Winfried Wahlen. So he was the CEO from 2005 to 2010, and that was one of the fastest growing periods for Volkswagen in China. So they had that Olympic strategy.
Right.
I think that was
And really quickly, Lee, I think it's worth noting that Volkswagen has had their way with the China market for quite some time, right? So this is unusual for them to be struggling so mightily.
And then after that, there was 2 years of KT Neumann, who came from Continental, and who's now posting his views on the Porsche Taycan on LinkedIn. I think he's somewhere else now. And then it was Heisman, Professor Heisman, that followed in 2012. He's a bit older, more conservative. Then came this young and energetic and very open and frank Wallenstein, based on my experience interacting with him, interviewing him. And now Ralf, right? And it's interesting to point out every single one of these CEOs had to face some kind of scrutiny in their tenure, during their tenure. So Wallen was seen as this very strict, very, he's the complete opposite of Wallenstein.
Right.
Very strict. And then KT Neumann was only there 2 years. He didn't have the CEO or the leadership mentality that others had. And then during Professor Heisman, they had that big DSG recall quality issue that was put up on the CCTV 315 gala, right? You probably remember that?
Yes.
That was one of their biggest crises, I think. And then now Wallenstein had to face the COVID-19 pandemic and the chip shortage and double, triple whammies. And now you have this new guy who is not familiar with China. Wallenstein is a China hand. Ralf is not. So
what happened to Dietz? What happened to that guy that was rumored like a month ago?
Alexander Seitz. I guess that was rumored.
Seitz, yeah.
Yeah, and then the only other person we can bring up is Wei Ming-so, right? He was rumored to be one of the more Asian or local person to head up Volkswagen China, but it's all been these expatriates, right? Yep. So I don't know. I don't know this is the right choice for Volkswagen, but it's somebody coming from within the group. So remember, these came from BMW.
Yep.
And I think that was good because he brought that kind of dynamism and willingness to change, and maybe it was a little bit overboard.
And he questioned the status quo.
Yeah, maybe it was a little bit overboard, putting Tesla, Elon at the forefront. If you listen to the event today, he mentioned, based on the English translation, he only mentioned Tesla once. The other times, he just basically said the American competitor.
But it still looms large. It still looms large in his speeches, right?
Yeah. So I think for Ralf, I responded on LinkedIn. Stefan, he put a post, and I said, well said. And Ralf replied, and I told him in reply that when you come over to China, sometimes next July, you need to have the mentality that whatever Volkswagen has built over the past 40 years in China, though very impressive and important, that's in the past world of ICEs. The Volkswagen brand and other group brands for that matter is still strong, but you need to treat China like starting from zero in the new NEV world. And have the understanding that past success does not translate to future success. And you need to be humble and willing to try new and uncomfortable things in China. And speed, agility really matter. And you need to pivot accordingly. And also understanding that Volkswagen, like a lot of other foreign automakers, are now playing catch up. They're no longer in that leadership position. Okay, so that's,
and this is completely unknown territory and uncomfortable territory for them, right?
Yeah. So Wallenstein still have some months to go.
Yeah.
So they will try to, at least ID is on a good path, I think. Both, in that chart we posted on Twitter, both Shanghai Volkswagen and FAW Volkswagen went over 10,000, but those also include the plugins and non-ID EVs. But at least it's improving. And
they got to take those wins. They got to take those wins and make some marketing, victories, right? So And I'll add one last thing, Lei, to your advice to Ralph. China speed is real. Unless you're here making these business decisions, it's going to be tough to see it from Germany, from Wolfsburg. So once you're here, and the entire organization needs to be nimble, right? Up and down, production, marketing, sales, customer engagement, and the current structure of the company does not support how fast the market moves here.
Right.
So we're looking at reorging the entire organization for Volkswagen China, from top to bottom. Departments need to be eliminated. Hierarchies probably need to be flattened, and the number of employees probably just needs to be reduced,
agree.
Right?
And starting from the Heisman era, they put the person in charge of China onto the board of management. Daimler also does that, right? Hubertus Troska, he's been the China guy, and he's been on the board. Starting from Heisman, and then now, Ralph, again, putting him on the board in charge of China. So, what I was just thinking, with Wallenstein being a China hand, and he's been at SAICVW, FAWVW for years. He's been in China for years. And for him to come from that position and still kind of, I don't want to use the word mess up, but I just think that decision-making process, you still have to go through headquarters. And I'm not sure
without question,
right? I'm not if he's open, he's frank. He responded directly to the media on his rumors of leaving. I'm not sure if he has that total responsibility and decision making autonomy. So this is something that,
and let's be frank, product strategy comes from Wolfsburg. It doesn't come from China, right? It's not. I don't know how much advice Volkswagen China gives Wolfsburg.
Volkswagen's been in China for more than 40 years.
And that's the thing that is like making me, hit my head against the wall a little bit. They're not looking at the data. They're not looking at the local data here.
That's why I say
about how the changes
can't do it. Then why can't Ralph do it? Why can Brandstatter do it? Right? We can't see the reasons behind it. But
this has nothing to do with Ralph. But I'll make a comment that you don't. I just feel that you can't be insular, right? If things are not working, things are being more challenging. We got to bring new blood in, try something different, right? Because these guys, they get rotated into different positions at Volkswagen. They've only known growth in China, right? They've only known growth globally for the last 20 years.
They've been down 2 years in a row. They're going to be down 2 years in a row.
And you can't bring a car guy to lead a software division. I'm sorry. You need to bring in, at least Stellantis brought in the Amazon guy to be the CTO for Stellantis, right? Those are the kind of things.
They can't afford to do it on their own. I mean, Carlos Tavares, he bluntly said that, it's not worth the money, and they're coming from a even, later position.
But don't you think that Volkswagen needs to make that and take a look in the mirror and make that objective evaluation as well? Like for Diess to say, we're just going to create this software entity. It's with the team that we currently have. We're just going to hire a bunch more people. It just seems.
This is like I think a home run kind of bet. And they're just waiting for that to, the 2025, 2026 period. Still some ways out, but I think they want to be patient.
But Lei, and I know I'm singing to the choir, but Deep Route just announced it, whether it's reliable, whether it's accurate. Let's push that aside for a second. They just announced a $10,000 hardware software stack for L4 autonomy.
That's how fast things. Marketing.
That's how fast things move here, right?
It is.
Why are we talking about 2026? Why are we talking about 2030?
Look at SAIC, for example, the Volkswagen partner. The reason that they've done this, first, they invested into Momenta. Second, they've had the Xiangdao Chuxing, Xiangdao Mobility running for years. right? So they have this ride-hailing experience, and now just putting the robotaxi into it, they already have that operational experience. And that's why WeRide is working with GAC, right? GAC and the local taxi companies. So for any of these robotaxi, whether it's standalone or the OEM based, they need to have the OEM support at scale. Look at Cruise with GM. Anybody else?
Without question. Without question.
So
without question.
So talking about speed.
We had kind of talked about this on WeChat just before we jumped on. We know how difficult it is. I think you and I appreciate the difficulty of these challenges that are facing these companies.
Yeah, it's easy for us to say. Try to put yourself in the position of Ralph and Stefan.
Yeah,
right?
and I empathize. I'm very, very tough on the U.S. automakers, but I almost feel like I'm one of those fathers that are just really tough on their kids because I want them to achieve, right? And I believe they have capable management. I don't think anyone is incompetent, but I just don't know if they have time to have incremental improvements over a 4 and 6 and 8 year period of time if they're going to maintain their share or at least try to defend it stridently, right? I think if they fail at any one of these things, it just weakens the entire organization. So,
yeah. Speaking of the U.S., so I was, we can move into the November sales numbers again.
Yeah, we talked about a Volkswagen for 25 minutes. So,
well, there's a lot to, digest and unpack. But back to the numbers. So, speaking of the U.S., I was looking at the comparison of the latest numbers. So, U.S. this year is going to do roughly 600,000, let's just say EVs, okay? And in the CPCA numbers, November wholesale was over 420,000 already. Granted that those include some exports, but still.
And 600K for the U.S. is good, right? Because I think they were at three and change last year, right?
It's almost
50%, more than 50% is Tesla, but 600,000 is a staggering increase.
Yeah, so it's like almost double last year or something.
Yes, almost.
Yeah, right. Yep. With still Tesla accounting for a bulk of those numbers. And so a big number to point out in China based on the CPCA numbers is the retail, so the domestic sales of new energy passenger vehicles accounted for more than 20% of the retail passenger vehicle sales. That's the first time that's ever happened in a month. And the year to date, the first 11 months was almost 14%, and 2020 was 5.8%. Okay, and if we look at these by brand origins or positions, independent brands, the penetration rate was 37.4%. Premium brands, 19.4%. Mainstream foreign joint venture brands, only 3.6%. And Volkswagen's got a bulk of that 6.6%.
That's what you call eating someone's lunch.
And the CAAM will announce their numbers later today. And based on the CPCA numbers, I think it's going to get to 450,000 units for the month of November. And that's
in a supply chain constrained market.
Yeah.
Let's remember that.
Out of roughly 2.5 million units. So my numbers come out to be 18%.
And I say that really quickly, Lei, because XPeng admitted that battery constraints will challenge them, right?
Yeah.
Yes, NIO did too. Sorry. So you and I talked about this. People are saying that, chips are under control now and should be fine for 2022. If China hits 5 million, it's going to be batteries and chips that are going to be fed hand to mouth by most of these automakers. So chips are not off the table. There's still going to be a challenge next year if China gets to anywhere close to 5 million units. Let me just say that.
Yeah, in Q4 right now, based on CAAM numbers, I'm estimating 1.3 million units for Q4, 1 quarter, which is almost equal to all of last year. I mean, I'm doing this.
It's Chabudur. It's Chabudur,
I'm
right?
doing this presentation tomorrow, by the way, for Eco Ocean event, and I need to update the slides right after I'm done with the pod today, because those numbers are just.
Just draw that growth line off of the chart, off of the freaking slide, right?
Yeah, that's what I say. It's changing by the hour, and the next minute you have these updates, and you say, "Oh wow!" And 5 million units, I think we're going to be surprised again. If the battery constraint,
emphasis on those numbers that you said, right? That 37, that 3%. These are the ones that matter, right?
Yeah. So there's no doubt that the transition is have turned, right?
Oh, whenever demand outstrips supply, yeah, that's the tipping point, right?
Just give you a few examples. Over the recent few days, a few of my friends, one bought a ID.6X, one bought a Li Auto 1, another one I think just registered for Li Auto 1. So just some examples that the consumers are now really embracing EVs. I mean, that's a fact.
Did you ask your friend who bought the VW what types of incentives they were given?
No, they compared the ID.4X, ID.6X, and the ID.6 Cross. They said ID.4 was a bit small. They have 2 kids.
Yeah.
And they said the ID.6X felt a little bit more premium in terms of the interior than the Cross.
X is the FAW.
X is the SAIC VW.
Okay.
And the Cross
is the SAIC or FAW.
Yeah, so and someone was posting pictures of a busy day at the DME or the 车管所, right? And it was all EVs being putting plates on, being registered in Beijing.
All green.
Because I think Beijing, they added, I think, 26,000 quotas this year, if I'm not mistaken. So just think about that. The demand is off the charts. And we still have this constraint. And Volkswagen, by the way, they said their sales were off because they couldn't produce enough. Okay,
fair enough.
So,
but that also means it's affecting the other companies as well, right? So everybody has. And I take that back. I won't say everybody has the same challenges, because some internal materials teams, supply chain teams are probably working harder than others to secure linear supply for their manufacturing sites here in China. So 2022, I will guarantee you, will be a busy year for the operations teams at each of these companies, right?
And 2022 is also the year when the subsidies are gone, will be gone. Right. So it will be the last year, right?
But we have to note that the significant subsidies went away 3 years ago. They're down to, I think, 20% or 30% of what they were originally, right? But
then again, it's already a market-driven market. It's no longer a policy-driven market, at least not as much as it used to be. So,
and 2022 is going to be really important because so many new products are entering the market, and so many more. I won't say new. So many more new products are entering the market. So the media marketing comms teams needs to really, really sharpen their pencils, understand the market, so that the communication strategy, the marketing strategy is on point, because it's just a massive mess of brands and products and price points, and it's going to be confusing to the consumer. So if everything's really confusing, brand's going to stand out, differentiating features are going to stand out, and price is going to stand out. So,
going back to that EV sales 10K club, there's a telltale signs. 16 companies. One is Tesla. Okay, Tesla is in a league of its own. Okay, and then the other 2 companies are Volkswagen joint ventures. The rest are all Chinese brands. SGM Wuling, it's debatable, but Wuling is a Chinese brand, even though it's a GM JV.
Right.
And BYD, if we talk about the domestic retail sales, I think Tesla was around 30,000, right? The 50,000 units, 20 were exported. So BYD, granted, they also have plugins, but 90,000 units were 3 times Tesla. So
So this brings me to that question, Lei, and let's speculate a little bit. Do you believe, because if Xpeng and NIO both said battery challenges for a supply standpoint, do you believe 2022, if there continues to be battery shortages like you and I predict, that BYD will be insulated from that
I
because
think
they're
so.
vertically integrated?
I think so.
If you were Ford and you're buying batteries from BYD, would you feel uneasy about this because they're also building their own cars? BYD is?
I think you have to find a way to ensure supply.
So the BYD salespeople are trying to reassure Ford that 2022 will not be any challenges to get those parts into their Mach-E's. The BYD battery sales guys are doing that right now. And Ford is probably what Ford is doing, because I have experience with this stuff. They're talking to BYD's upper management and saying, they're not trying to talk to account managers. They're trying to talk to the upper management and saying, we took a chance on BYD because we believe in your technology. We believe in the brand. Don't screw us by prioritizing your production ahead of our production. We're your customer. So that's what Ford is really, really emphasizing to the BYD folks, I bet, right now.
And going back to April, I think the Mustang Mach-E had a huge fanfare at the event, and then people were like,
Yes.
even the media people were like, "Oh, I'm putting down, down payment. I'm ordering one." But it's been 7 months? I think they were supposed to start deliveries. I haven't heard anything. So any
I have not
significant
either.
sales will come from 2022. Then again, you look at these, the companies that join the 10K club, and the Chinese brands are already dominating. I feel a bit pessimistic on the Mustang Mach-E now, even though, okay, BYD may be, doing the batteries, but can it be a competitive offering?
I think so. I think it's new.
I hope so, but
I think that's what it holds for itself, right?
it's quieted down quite a bit in terms of the publicity, and so we'll see.
Yeah, it would have been nice to start delivering with all of that momentum, right?
Yeah.
One last thing I will mention, and it's a basic economics supply demand thing. If supply is constrained on the battery side, you could likely expect to see prices go up. So cost per kilowatt hour, and not because we can't get the volume, it's because the volume is constrained. So we could see margins get squeezed a little bit in 2022 from for some OEMs. So I think that's something else to watch for, unless they can get around the battery cell constraints.
What else?
What's next?
I think we've covered pretty much a lot in the 40 minutes that we have.
And
by the way,
I did want to add, Ford this week also announced, probably because of this supply constraint, one of the reasons at least, that they are dual sourcing their batteries to CATL and BYD.
Yeah,
it's notable
heard that
in
as well.
China. Yeah, so it's notable in China that Ford is picking what I believe they deem as the most reliable two battery suppliers in China for Chinese domestic production. So that's a huge endorsement, and they're the two big dogs, I think, in China, right? Who's the third and fourth, do you think, on the battery cell side? Ferasis, Goshen?
Probably Goshen. So CATL, BYD, Goshen, and then the other, Ferasis, Eve, CALB.
But they're much, much lower down, right?
Yeah, much lower, yeah. And then Asphalt. Asphalt is trying to be relevant. I think I think in the latest list ranking of battery installation, they were number 9 in, was it October or November? So they got into the top 10. So and they supply mostly Great Wall.
Now it's a race to invest in increasing capacity, right?
Yeah, and I guess the only other thing we can mention is that NIO is supposedly getting to that 700 power swap station today, your time.
Yeah.
Right? Remember they said by the end of the year, so
BFD, big
they'll
effing
get
deal.
there, and they recently held a event which I posted some of their charts about their business model, that big flywheel, right? And they said next year, by the first half of next year, they'll have 1,100 power swap stations, so 50% more than 50% more to be added. And so next weekend will be the NEO Day. So Will sent a message regarding, I think it's a good point, regarding the latest EV sales and what's going to happen. The end of year are always, whenever subsidies, when they get reduced starting in the new year, we're going to have these people who are going to say, hey, I need that 6,000 RMB savings, so I'm going to buy one. So that's why November, December sales are going to be record months. And that's what I was going to say.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.